Hey, yo, it's Nigel, gaming, the arcade one-up Marvel vs. Capcom 2 arcade cabinet. Considering all of the hype surrounding the new release of the Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection on the PlayStation 4 and the Nintendo Switch, I decided to dip into the archive and pull up the old video of me assembling this cabinet released from the arcade one-up. Before we get too deep into this video, I have to start off by saying that I built this in my mom's basement. Now technically, I own the house, but at the time of this recording, I actually didn't live in the house, so some of the tools that I used were kind of whatever I could find at the time. But I just felt it important to share some of the things that I learned as I built this. Some tips and tricks, so to speak. There are some things that I learned while building this that I wish I had known beforehand. So this is me passing on that information to you, so you maybe have an easier time at this than I did. There's also a little bit of gamer knowledge that I've picked up over the years that you won't find in any manuals. So with that in mind, let's get into it. I'll be speeding through some of the slower parts of this video. Feel free to slow down the video on your end if you want to watch at normal speed. I'll do my best to put timestamps in the description so you can skip ahead to the more juicy parts. But let's go ahead and fast forward. This is one of the most important takeaways from this entire adventure. I decided to put a coin door into my cabinet, so I just went online to Tulsa Arcade and ordered what I found online. However, it would seem that all of these cabinets come in different sizes from the manufacturer. So what I recommend you doing is actually measuring your opening and then calling them and verbally telling them what size you have so they can custom cut it for you. I made the mistake of not doing this and my coin door came the wrong size. I eventually had to go and manually cut my own door, so I highly recommend that you measure it first and then have a conversation with them over the phone and tell them what size you want and need so they can custom cut it for you. Don't forget. Here is a quick flip through the instruction booklet. If you've ever built IKEA furniture before, you'll have no problem assembling this cabinet. And even if you haven't, the instructions are pretty straightforward and easy to understand. I can't emphasize enough to not use power tools. Particle composite wood that this is made out of is kind of sensitive, and if you're not careful, you will damage the cabinet. So use nothing but hand tools unless absolutely necessary. This is a modification that I highly recommend. Underneath the control panel, before finally assembling it, I added weather stripping that's about 1 inch wide by 1/8 of an inch deep. In the final iteration, I ended up putting about 3 strips totaling 3/8 of an inch in depth. When you put the control panel on without this lift, there ends up being an edge on the side of the panels where your hands will end up rubbing against constantly. So I highly recommend lifting it up a little bit so that it's a smooth edge that your hand never rubs up against. If anything, it just falls off the edge of the cabinet. It makes for a much smoother gameplay and causes less injury damage to your hand. Some of these matches can get intense, and reducing the amount of chafing that happens on your hands will be greatly appreciated over time. The arcade 1-up cabinets are notoriously comically short. I'm approximately 6 feet tall, give or take a few centimeters. And to me, the cabinet is just way too short. So amongst other modifications to the base, I included these 2-inch leveling feet that add a couple more inches to the height of the arcade cabinet so that it's a little bit more usable for someone my height. I also included these felt furniture pads to add about another half an inch or so to the height and also make it easier to move the cabinet around, adjust the position, stuff like that. So yeah, I highly recommend adding that as well, just to give it a little bit more height and make it a little bit easier to use in the future. To give the cabinet a more we have arcades at home vibe, I decided to install Govee LED lights to the base and to the back of the cabinet. I highly recommend buying Govee over other brands like Hue, even though they're not quite as bright. They're a little more affordable and often go on sale. So yeah, if you do want to do this addition, go ahead and grab the Govee LED lights. Now, bear with me a little bit here as I try to explain the modifications I made to the base. You're going to want to go ahead and measure the opening on the bottom of the arcade stand. Once you've cut out the baseboard, you're going to want to go ahead and measure about a ½ inch in and draw a border that's that dimension from the exterior. Then, once you've drawn that, measure another ½ inch in and draw another border, and then what you'll have is the outline for where your Govee light strips will sit. From this 1-inch border, go ahead and measure another 2 inches and draw another border line. Now what you've done is drawn little squares where your feet levelers will sit. Go ahead and place them in the square and draw out a circle. In the center of this diameter, you're going to want to drill a ½ inch hole using a power drill with a ½ inch bit. These holes are ultimately where your T-nuts will be hammered in, no diddy, and then from there you'll be able to screw in your feet levelers. This last border that you've drawn should act as a guide to where the stabilizers will reside inside of the riser. I want to emphasize to not make the mistake that I made and just assume that this line will line up exactly to where the stabilizers live inside of the riser. Instead, go inside and then measure inside out to where they should be and go ahead and drill guide holes so that you can screw your screws in from there. I'll emphasize this point later once I turn the riser upside down, or right side up, excuse me. Ultimately, you'll want to go ahead and drill a hole into the center of the baseboard. This is where you'll funnel the Govee light strip into the arcade cabinet, where you'll attach it to the power strip that lives there. You'll want to be sure that this hole is slightly larger than your ½ inch strip so that it can feed through easily, but not too big so that light will leak through. To add a bit of flair and make my cabinet seem a little more unique than others, I found this light blue vinyl pinstriping tape. This will allow the light to pop a little bit more as it reflects upon this blue color. I actually saw that the original cabinets had this blue strip on the edges of the cabinets and decided that it was a good addition. I highly recommend doing this, although on the bottom it might be a little bit superfluous. However, in hindsight, I do see that it does add a little bit something when you look at it from afar. When the LED lights are turned on, the blue tape does refract a blue hue that gives the cabinet a little bit more life to it. An important feature that I almost forgot. Once you've screwed in your baseboard into the riser, you'll want to go ahead and get some black electric tape and seal off the corners or the edges of the baseboard to ensure that light doesn't leak out from the inside of the cabinet. This will make sure that the light that comes off from the base is as bright as possible and not mixed in with any other light from inside the cabinet. I went through a lot of mental back and forth on whether or not to continue using the light blue vinyl tape on the exterior of the cabinet, but I thought it was a little bit too much blue. But then I found an old photo of the Capcom vs. Marvel 2 cabinet that had a hot pink on the exterior, and I thought, hey, I like that. Let's do it. I'm pleased with the decision because now it has a lot of flair and it stands out and it looks much more unique than it originally did. A helpful tip for applying the vinyl tape: when your two corners meet, leave a little bit of excess tape on top of the other piece of tape that you've laid out before, and then pull the tape all the way to the edge. Then you can cut off the excess tape and make sure that the edges are flush. This will help with the effect of the tape looking seamless. An additional tip for applying the vinyl tape to the cabinet itself: go ahead and start from the bottom and work your way up. This will help with the application and make sure that the vinyl itself sticks to the cabinet. When you're above the control deck, work from the bottom and then make one continuous strip that goes all the way up, above, and then to the back. This is much easier this way, and it makes it a little bit faster than it normally would be if you do it any other way. You're going to want to go ahead and drill a hole on the inside of the cabinet. I put mine in the bottom right corner here, out of the way of any existing hardware that will live inside of the cabinet. When you're extending the Govee light strip, you're going to want to pull it through this hole and give yourself a little bit of an excess so that if for some reason you need to open and move the top of the cabinet around from the bottom riser, you have a little bit of wiggle room and you won't disrupt any attachment that exists from the top and the bottom of the Govee strips. You're going to want a power strip that has at least 3 outlets. One for the cabinet itself, the other for the Govee LED light strips, and then the final one for the arcade coin door if you choose to install one. I chose a quote-unquote smart power strip just so that I could say out loud to Alexa, oh, sorry if I set off your Alexa, just so I can tell her, hey, turn on my cabinet, and without having to open up the door every time I wanted something to be turned on. I went ahead and invested in an arcade coin slot from X Arcade. I really wanted to replicate the feeling of being in an arcade and having to put a quarter down every time I wanted to play. This really emphasizes the importance of every match because a whole 25 pennies were on the line. This portion of the video is more of a cautionary tale documenting all of the trouble I had to go through to create my own panel for the arcade coin door. Again, if you decide to put your own arcade coin door into your arcade 1-up, go ahead and measure the panel that comes with the arcade 1-up cabinet and call whoever it is you get it from, whether it be Tulsa Arcade or some other distributor, and have them custom make for you this panel. Tell them the measurements and they'll cut it for you, and it'll be easy peasy. You won't have to go through all the trouble that I did. What I ended up doing was using the panel that I ordered from Tulsa Arcade and mapping out where it goes into my personally cut wood panel, and then had to go through the trouble of cutting it out on my own. It may be because this was a limited edition, so to speak, arcade 1-up cabinet that the doors were unique and different than what was normal, but from what I understand after talking to the people at Tulsa Arcade, somehow they're almost always different. They kind of made it seem like it was a conspiracy against them, but I can't imagine that someone would target such a small company. Not to say that they're small, but that they're more or less mom and pop, and I don't see anyone having an agenda against them. Like I said before, I think it's just because that this was a limited edition arcade that they had someone different than normal make this cabinet, and the panel ended up being a different size than normal. So I can't express how important it is to measure the panel, call them, and have them custom cut it for you. It's so much easier that way. Although it didn't come out perfect, I'm actually pretty pleased with the way that it turned out. You know, I like all the flaws that it has. It gives it a little bit more personality and makes it unique to my cabinet. Now on to hardwiring the coin door. You're going to want to disconnect the cables that are connected to the first player and second player buttons in the control panel. X-Arcade provides all of the hardware and cables that you need to make this modification. Once you've opened up the control panel, remove the female wire end from the male end of the button. Then connect the male end of the provided wire to the female end of the connected wire on the control panel. It's a very simple switch modification, and what you'll want to do is when you put the casing back together, just make sure that the wires extend out from the back end of the control panel. Very simple. Takes a little bit of time and some maneuvering, but it's a very simple process. It's not very complicated. I ended up taping this new connection together with electrical tape. It's a bit of a redundancy, but I really did not want to come back and fix this later. Also, like I said before, make sure you extend the new wire to the back of the control panel so that it can connect to the arcade coin door. On the inside of the cabinet, you'll want to tighten these fasteners to another piece of wood, which will make it that it's flush to the panel. If you get this custom made, it'll come with another cutout that you will attach to the back of the panel that comes with, and that'll tighten it. I just had to do this in a more rigged kind of way because I ended up cutting the panel on my own. Again, like I said before, don't do what I did in this case. It's such a pain. I ended up adding a square metal outlet box to replicate the sound of the coin dropping into the coin receptor in old arcade cabinets. I thought it was a fun addition. I don't think anyone will really hear it but me, but nostalgia, I needed everything that I can get. Finally, you'll want to connect the female end of the provided wire to the hardware itself on the coin door. It's a little bit hard to squeeze your fingers into this tiny little space, but fortunately the wire itself does slide in like butter. It's not super hard, it's just a matter of getting it to that right position. Other than that, it just slides right in. So essentially, the coin slot itself just acts like a button. Once the quarter slides through, it's just triggering a response from the coin door itself to the CPU, and it just thinks that a button was pressed. There's nothing really fancy here. It's actually pretty simple when you think about it. And it's really great that someone thought of this and made it so that you can modify an arcade one-up cabinet to do this. Now just plug everything into your power cord and you're ready to go. Lastly, but most importantly, it's time to swap out these terrible buttons that come with these arcade 1-up cabinets. They're concave instead of convex, which makes it really difficult to input some commands. Some of these games require you to slide your fingers back and forth across all of the buttons in order to input commands. And with these concave edges, that's next to impossible. If you know, you know. I ended up choosing more light neon colors of the existing buttons. The Sanwa buttons, in my opinion, are much better. They don't sound as loud and don't feel as hollow. And the concave edges allow my fingers to slide back and forth across all of the buttons. Sadly, it's not as easy as just hot swapping these buttons. The Sanwa buttons will not fit into these 30mm holes that are existing in the arcade 1-up cabinets. They have these little notches on the edge of them that you have to kind of scrape away. Using a utility knife, it's not that hard. They're plastic and it's very easy to cut these pieces off. I'll demonstrate it here in this video. And voila, there you have it. Once you remove the notches from the Sanwa buttons, you can remove the existing arcade 1-up buttons and just pop these guys in. Just be sure to connect the female wire to the male end of the buttons, and there you go, new buttons ready to go. And now the moment of truth, guys and gentle thoughts. Time to turn this baby on and see how she runs. There you have it, the full build and all of the current modifications that I've made to my Marvel vs. Capcom 2 arcade 1-up cabinet. I do have plans to make some changes in the future, and if that interests you, let me know and I'll make another video. Until then guys, take care. Hey yo, you know the like button is free? If you made it this far into the video, we appreciate you spending your time with us. Subscribe and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye bye.